now the chief of AI at level 5 automation at Lyft. So just having exposure for how to architect and how to have the conversation is very important here. I mean, defining AI is like defining consciousness. It's just very, very difficult. But I like coming at it from different entry points, being able to predict the future, being able to recognize patterns, and being able to achieve complex goals. And then you transition into machine learning, which is essentially a machine's ability to achieve an outcome without being explicitly programmed how to do so. And then you mentioned deep learning. So when we're talking about market level data, you're talking about purchase patterns, contextual attributes, anything that can be passed back within ad server impression ID. So all of those things being combined and clustered is very important to how a machine learning algorithm can structure that information. So if you have a ton of conversions that have just taken place, or any kind of proxy that you want somebody to do, some type of engagement on a page, all of that stuff can be measured in terms of where that person came from, if you're looking at cookie profiles, purchase patterns and behaviors, and then you evolve that into what I mentioned earlier so that you can build a propensity score and a predictive model for what they want to do next, what they're going to buy next. And essentially when we're talking about marketing, AI machine learning really only has 3 jobs, and that's driving business performance, being able to provide granular insights about that customer using that market data, and then obviously being able to make that experience as relevant as possible. So all of that market data is really amplifying the experience from the perspective of being as relevant as possible. Us, we're marketers, so we think that, every single customer is thinking about our brand or product 24 hours a day, when really, they want to think about it when they want to think about it, where it appears in their mind. Not everything is a nail, even though our platforms are hammers, but data is the fuel, data is the new oil, all of that stuff that you've heard, but it's a matter of structuring that data to be able to recognize patterns and predict the future.
Hello, right? You've got banks. I just won't say agents. Just banks have tons of data. Any interesting uses of the bank use besides predicting my credit score?
Yes. So I'll bring in actually 2 perspectives. One with the bank. Of course, I work for a bank now, and I was in retail for a good 5.5 years. So today, I think whether it's banks like us, HSBC, or others, today there's enough and more that is happening around data and machine learning, whether it's being able to do credit scoring on people through alternate credit models, to being able from the other side to be having personalization. We saw the Citibank presentation in the morning about having an offer bot, to using today consumer data to be able to build voice user interfaces, to be able to do voice banking on voice assistants like Alexa or Google for that matter. So it's all being fueled by data. The machines are learning much faster than humans are. But at the same time, I think going back to the Oracle presentation, the human element is what brings in the creativity and the empathy, and most importantly, the sensibility to be able to use the data that is being fed into all these machines, and the output, whether it's in form of a text-based chatbot or a recommendation or personalization, even credit scoring for that matter. Having said that, today, apart from banking, I also bring in a perspective of retail, where again, data today is the fuel for a lot of things that are happening in commerce, whether it's recommending the right set of products to customers. At Titan, where I was before HSBC, we started experimenting with the chatbot almost 2 years back, with the whole premise of doing something new on Valentine's Day, which was sort of the most, the biggest gifting occasion as far as e-commerce is concerned. And how that really scaled up into becoming a product recommendation engine for customers. And it was all courtesy that the data that we were able to bring in from the social accounts of people, because we started the chatbot through Facebook Messenger. It went on to become one of the most sought after bots on Facebook Messenger.
I'm going to riff off to what you were saying just now. You were saying machines are learning faster than humans. Mr. Discovery, any thoughts on that? That's a scary thought.
Let me give you a different view, from a content perspective. If you look at data, there are two different kinds of data. There is structured for a consumer that you own, and there is unstructured data. Now the problem with deep learning and a lot of data is like a double-edged sword. Deep learning can also get you into deep trouble, and we've seen that a lot with the unstructured data. Let's say, for example, there's a lot of trending data which you want to use as inputs to create content. Classic example right now is fake news, which we hear about, but maybe you get the wrong inputs. You're actually landing up in a chamber which is going to keep echoing the same thing, and you'll keep going in that direction. On the other hand, if you get the right inputs, you're going to go back and actually create the ingredients of that content, which is really going to make you loved content, or in another manner, you want to term it as viral content. But from my perspective, if you have to look at humans and machines, it's the world of co-creation. Whether we like it or we hate it, we really can't ignore it. It's the necessity. But content as a business.
I'll stay with you. I'll jump to the next one, which is creativity, machine learning, right? As you were getting into the creation of humans. So, creative. These images here were actually created by an AI, by machine learning, and they look like proper paintings and stuff like that, right? So, what are your thoughts on
So when it comes to creativity in terms of content, and you want to look at triggers of what's really going to work for your content, I think one thing is very important. Machine learning can throw different kinds of things, and all of us are aware how different content pieces are evolving, right? From different artwork to different posters to different kind of trailers happening from different video frames, etc. of what people love. But I think we must never forget one important thing, that the media business is about creating content that appeals to the consumer's heart. Over here, we're creating a scenario where there is co-creation between human learning and machine learning. While you are appealing to the heart constantly, that's never ever going to change. Now you have a better equipped machine learning system, which I would call a brain, who's assisting you in helping to appeal to the heart. And that's really what the essence of creativity is going to be about, when you look at combination of learning between two systems. It could be various fields. You can look at various aspects of learning within creativity. So it could be from promos to creating artwork to creating content to actually getting into user experiences, using consumer insights, so on and so forth. But you will have to continue to appeal to the
I'm going to jump to Nico's real quick. Right? Creativity is defined as the use of imagination or original ideas to create something. That's creativity. Can machines do that?
Absolutely. I mean, you gave the example over here. I think it begs the question, though, of is the process part of the end product itself? It doesn't matter. To consumers, maybe not, but you had an auction piece at Sotheby's that just went for $4.3 million because it was the first painting that was created by an AI, and now you have more and more examples of this. You have Sony Labs that's creating pop hits that just by ingesting top 40, the best top 40 hits over the last 50 years or so, and then creating machine learning algorithms based on those hits. You have the same music company called Amber, but it's like, okay, are you going to just create all of these generic hits for that specific outcome if it's going to sell more stuff? Or is it the novelty of the fact that a machine learning algorithm did create those products? When it comes to ads, I do agree with you that it comes down to engaging with a customer in a way that's going to touch their heart, in a way that's going to engage them the most, but really the creative process is bringing a novel output and outcome based on all of these different derivatives put together. And I think it's really important to note that not everything can be put into an algorithm, and part of human creativity is the fact that it can't be modeled. You don't know where inspiration ultimately comes from, and a catalyst can ultimately come from everywhere. If you replicate that process and dilute it, then I think it loses some of its value.
Sundar, I have a different question for you, but go ahead.
We are at the cusp of, at Adobe, we see people being able to create content in multifarious ways and then use it for their campaigns. And I think I agree with all the sentiments which have been echoed, but here are a few things that have worked very well for our customers who are obviously wanting to create content on the fly, which is still creative. It's very creative. It appeals to the heart, yet has to be personalized and has to be available real time for them to be able to run campaigns and even appeal to people. It could be.
Is it pretty?
So it is. Yeah.
Is it pretty much A/B testing, multivariate testing, test and target, which is what Adobe has, right?
Yes.
Is it just sort of try and figure it all out?
Yeah. So I think what the paradigm of thinking which has worked very well for some of our customers is that there is an overall creative direction that is decided, right? Which is, to your point, appealing to the heart. And within that framework, it's about how you're able to customize it to appeal to different personas. So yes, it is a combination of creativity and there is a whole lot of technology which still makes it possible for them to be available real time, be able to measure, change as we speak. So if it's not this design, if it's that design which works, that still should be possible. And that's the speed and that's the level of personalization we still want to get to. But it has to be guided by a larger creative framework which is quite independent of the technology that actually takes it to the market. So we actually deal with both sides of that equation, which is about customers creating content and then being able to take it to the customers in the digital format.
Hello, from a business perspective, would you look at creative to try to personalize or segmentize?
Yes, so I think for us it is more about being able to create that omni-channel experience for customers, which is where staying on the same thread of creativity plus machine learning. At HSBC, as a global bank, we're transforming ourselves to becoming a digitally led bank altogether. Which is where, if I were to look at stuff that we've done very recently, including launching a robotics piece in New York, where it's all about being able to do close to about 300 transactions through that robo, or having a chatbot today to do banking or a voice bot for that matter to be able to do those transactions. It's the customer experience. Now, when I say customer experience, it's not about today creating a customer experience that is only for machine-driven pieces or DIY pieces. It has to be consistent with the customer experience that is being delivered through the human touch at a branch. So we're talking about the conversational user experience which has to be consistent across all of these, which means you obviously use the machine today, but then there is still the large human emotional angle to it. At the same time, you need the machines to be able to design those experiences. Today, if you have a voice-enabled solution that is offering a customer a transaction over his mobile phone, it has to be consistent with the human experience, which is where it's still at the cusp, as what he's saying. It's not that today, while I said yes, machines are learning faster, but then the human experience, which is the sort of need, and when people talk about things like virtual reality, I think we need that piece of mixed reality, which is a combination of both.
So the idea is to use that just to service the client, right?
Yes.
From a content, like pure content, enjoyable content perspective, how are you using, are you using machine learning to determine, I don't know, scripts or what shows to produce or what?
So from a content creator perspective, it's always important to diversify and expand in two ways, right? There are major challenges there, and machine learning really helps to overcome that. The first one is you're always looking to get to newer territories all the time, and second, in this OTT explosive environment, you're always wanting to put data over there. So you have a piece of content that needs to be traveling across geographies in specific manners, and when you look at machine learning, it helps you do a lot of things. So for example, I would look at the 3 V's over here. It could be voice, video, and vernacular. That is something which really helps you. So when it's voice, there are various technologies which today are available globally, which is helping you not just convert text to voice, but also in a manner help you sync your lip movements in a manner by taking just a couple of hours of video and kind of get there. Then you've got vernacular, which is very, very important, especially not just from an international language perspective, but in India, where there are so many dialects available. So you have a piece of content, and especially the growth, the next billion actually is expected from the vernacular medium itself. And then you've got video,
Yeah.
like you kind of mentioned.
Yeah, you see Netflix doing all these recommendations, right? I don't like my recommendations. Who here likes recommendations on Netflix? 10%. I mean, other people don't raise their hand, but I don't like it. They don't seem to know what I want to watch. They can give me the same thing, which is nothing.
Absolutely agree with you. I think there are two challenges there for any content provider. One is you're giving recommendations, that's important. They try to tweak it to your tastes, etc. But it's also how the recommendation is planned, and there are various algorithms and challenges which don't satisfy everyone's requirement, including mine. So for example, they may, in their experimentation, they or any other platform may land up throwing a different artwork to you, which they feel like you like it, but you may not like it specifically. They are throwing things where different posters are appealing. Maybe at times you are actually visualizing two creatives separately on the same day. So too many permutations and combinations. Like I said, deep learning can cause deep trouble. I think everybody today in the content space is experimenting and learning from that.
I'll move on. We'll be curious to see if the movie studios can start producing trailers using AI.
You know, not the trailers, but I had a very interesting experience 2 months back with a production house that I was working with. And I actually went and met this place which is producing television serials, right? And so they have arrived at a template which lasts for about 24 minutes, right? And which is supposed to have, they have arrived at in their own machine learning paradigm. This is using technology that they have actually arrived at. They ran about 40 episodes and then they've arrived at what they believe is the perfect mix, saying so many screens have to be showing happy faces, so many screens per episode have to look like, you know, there is a serious issue. There is humor for roughly 10-15% of the time. So they've arrived at that fantastic recipe which gets replicated. And they have a plan A and they have a plan B. So plan A is all the even number serial episodes, and plan B is for all the odd number episodes. And that's how they that's how they shoot. And so I was wondering, so where is all this thing about being able to tell a story and make it interesting? They said, look, we figured it out. It works. And of course, the person who was talking to me was the director. So she could not really tell me about the technology that they've used. But when I went back and looked at what the kind of research that they have done with their audience, it was fantastic. This is a crowdsourced model which is taking into account what the audience wants, and they've analyzed, you know, thousands of hours of television before they came to this, you know, the magic formula that is there. So yet, you know, if you know the background, you know, probably it takes a lot of steam away from actually watching it, because you say, well, this is all pre-programmed and this is what it's like watching a fixed cricket match, right? But still, I think it was very interesting. If you had not known that, it still means that they are able to maintain and sustain this television serial, which is what a soap is supposed to do.
So you're saying
you've seen that people are doing that.
Yeah, you're saying crowdsourcing, so it's going to lead to the next one, which is social media and machine learning. I was reading a case study with Kia a couple of years ago. Through some machine learning algorithms at social media to determine who are the influencers of their brand, and then what message to give those influencers to get the maximum, you know, brand. Any other examples, Nikos, that uses, you know, harnesses this crowdsourced social media noise? There's lots of.
I think what's percolating to the top across what everybody's saying here is that there are input parameters and there are output parameters, and then there's the middle layer, which are kind of the unknown vectors that you're talking about, right? The unstructured data. And so, first of all, it's only the big social platforms that have enough data to start making predictions about what kind of content can start to be broken down to give to the influencers. In terms of examples, I like the AI Michaela example. She's not even a real AI, but she's a person that started putting makeup on, and then now she's got like 4 million followers or so on Instagram. But those producers are doing innovative things like applying natural language processing to all of the different comments and starting to be able to break down the engagement factors. So again, when you can predict patterns across all of these different vectors and mediums, you can start to assess what starts to bubble up to the surface using social media. And again, it's the walled gardens that are going to win here because they have enough data to start influencing those types of behaviors.
And not sharing.
And not sharing anything
They're not allowed to
whatsoever.
share.
Well, they're not allowed to share.
share.
And we'll get to that, I'm sure, but there exists the inherent patterns. But obviously emojis are a big pattern recognition factor that you can now start to decipher things that codify what would get people to buy more stuff, and then obviously seeing across the board the types of content, and then I recommend everybody to read the new analysis that came out on the top Instagram profiles and what were the engagement factors. But what we're finding here is that it's harder to get to the nuanced stuff when it gets to content. It's easy to decipher ad type, ad size, whether or not you played a video versus uploaded an image. You have big data sets that are able to decipher that, but when it gets down to the actual content, messaging, the tone, when you get to the nuanced emotional factors, it's very hard to determine that and create a big data set. And it's also why Netflix hasn't been good at giving you recommendations, Joe.
Yeah. Hello, you mentioned social media before. What kind of emoticons are you using? Emojis.
So we aren't using emojis. I think banking is fairly regulated. I think we're not getting somewhere.
You're not allowed to use emojis in banking?
So, but at the same time, I think what has really worked is the whole social media-based, I would say, recommendations as far as restaurants are concerned. We had someone mentioning in the morning, basis your location and basis your food graph in terms of people have been doing check-ins across the restaurants that you've been doing, and to be able to link it today with the credit card customer specifically, and we have something in Singapore that has been that's become fairly popular in terms of.
I wouldn't ask about HSP in particular, but are banks looking at social media, combining social media data with consumers' data? Banks in general. I'm not saying any particular bank.
Yes, so obviously I can't comment on how specifically HSBC is doing it, but of course banks today are using social media in a big way to be able to not only look at winning restaurant options to, or for that matter, holiday options to customers, but even for the sake of credit scoring their customers. Because today, like I think in the morning we discussed, there is a large part of the country that is still unbanked. There are people who don't have any credit histories per se. So today, whether it's social media or other alternate mediums of being able to score a person's credit worthiness, because there are people who obviously don't have any bureau scores. So that is where the whole social media piece becomes very important in terms of being able to really. So this is not perhaps the only way a bank would do it, but then it is one of the ways you look at identifying whether this person is worth tomorrow giving him a credit card or a loan for the bank.
I've always said, that social media is the front end of the CRM. Right? It's how you interact because there's a lot of feedback. So, there any kind of thoughts on as the cloud and you're obviously going to
We don't have CRM software as such. We don't deal with that space, but clearly there is. I would agree with that. That is really the ahead of the whole process, which ends up all the way up with the purchase. But I'd like to raise an issue or topic, and it sort of bubbled up to me when I was recently teaching at Stanford, and there was one thinking which came out about when you're talking about content and machine learning in general, and that sort of spans across social media and all the other channels that you're looking at, is about when you want your content to be authentic and appear authentic as well. If something is very coached it's very clear to people that this is not authentic, right? And what machine learning actually does with the current paradigms, and I think they're evolving, but the way they are currently is that you get to consume content of a particular type only. It's sort of making your whole world fairly biased in the way you get recommendations which are again may not be suiting you, or maybe suiting you is another matter, but it is still biased. So the case that was being made is, if you want your brand to be sounding and looking authentic, right, you have to ensure that there's always a very balanced presentation of content on the topic that you want to be communicating on. So to the world,
you went right into branding. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump. But
no, that's great because we run out of time.
So it's like why our society is so polarized. For example, on political issues. I was in the US, so you know what I was talking about. It's also because people who are consuming one particular type of content, because of the fact that they're using digital platforms, the machines are learning, and you get content only of a particular type, and which has got a particular thinking. You do not have exposure to the content of other type. So that was just a thought which is coming to my mind, that if we were to create content and still appear authentic, brands have to take care that they are not seen as part of it.
So I mean, branding-wise, it's about consumer insights, right? Brands, HSBC, most brands do tons of research, right, before they launch a product or something like that, right? I mean, this is where I see machine learning sort of, what's the experience there? Also, hello.
So of course, like I mentioned, for a bank that is looking at digital as the major frontier, there is a lot of research that goes into building a new product altogether. So obviously, I wouldn't say that there is already too much on machine learning happening there, but then in terms of consumer habits, whether when you're designing, as I mentioned earlier, interfaces that are today conversational interfaces, in terms of how a particular user or his habits when it comes to either applying for a product online, or it is in terms of engaging with a bank or a financial services company is there. A lot of that data today is used versus just the old school way of going and interviewing consumers what their habits would be. But then today, I cannot say that machine learning has perfected the art of being able to deliver something for a brand in absence of a human touch or the human creative angle that we touched upon. It is today a process that assists today in designing a product, not necessarily dictates it.
Carl Schall just now, one of his comments in his slide was, brands are using AI to model emotions. I'm going to throw this one at you because, what do you think?
Sure. I've innovated on a specific project in which we ingest emotional data. I can't speak too much more about it because it's still in the works, given the right market sizing. But it was based on a study Motista conducted about in 2015. Can you model consumers from an insights perspective? So for instance, can you apply dynamic creative optimization to a segment of audiences that want to change the world versus a segment of audiences that feel a sense of rebellion versus audiences that are politically driven versus audiences that are sports enthusiasts. So there are different archetypes that bubble up to the surface. The only challenge with emotional triggers and proxies is that they don't scale very well. The good news
Russians do it really well.
The Russians do it very well, but they don't do it in a very legal way. And we'll get to GDPR in a moment. But it's tough to model emotional behavior just because there isn't. It's very tough to segment, and it's tough to connect the dots between granular attributes that you can measure to the more nuanced aspects of, well, who are the people that really respond very well to psychological drama versus being sports driven versus a motivational factor. But you can do it, and if you have a dynamic creative engine that's creating and building and ingesting the taxonomy of all of these different ads and assets, especially when you have ad server impressions, about 3 trillion or so different ad server impression IDs, you can start to segment beyond the background image was blue, the click here image was orange, the ad server impression was created here and served to these people at 4 p.m. Here are the purchase categories. That's not very interesting. When you start connecting those dots into more of these nuanced attributes, that's where it gets very interesting. And we found that there are ways to connect the dots between emotional attributes and actual performance-based outcomes. The challenge is, is it a $5 million opportunity or is it a $500 million opportunity? That still is yet to be determined how those connect.
I'm going to jump to voice and speech. We've alluded to it a bit of time. I think Vikram alluded to it as well. Anyone here, when you're online or when you're chatting, do you know when you're talking to a bot? Who here thinks they actually know exactly when they're talking to a bot on a chat? Right. And this field is still in early development, right? Vikram, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you ask machines, they will agree that human language is a complicated thing. We can talk about human emotions, and that's a great piece to dwell with. And there's a lot of work going on, like Nicholas mentioned over there. But when it comes to chatting with bots, etc., you'll actually realize if some of you guys try doing that, and I've seen like demo of one, it'll give you testimonial that social media, for example, is a great place for humans and a beautiful place for humans to interact, but it's a really awkward place for machines to interact. And you really discover that when you start chatting with them, when you start interacting it, how difficult they find it to exhibit human behavior.
Is it still difficult? You talk about it.
It's not, I wouldn't say it's not altogether as extreme as...
Beyond the FAQs.
Yeah. No, but I would say it's different. It's not only FAQs, it's the way you're able to train the bot. So if you have an untrained bot and if you just launched a bot for as a marketing gimmick, then of course it will only do FAQs. But then if you invest into the bot, you make the bot learn, and it's an exercise that takes a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of data. At the same time, also the courage to go and experiment it on a platform. Then, of course, the bot will be able to answer queries, and in most cases, consumers are not able to make out because all good bots today are sort of backed up by humans who sort of intervene the moment they realize that the query, the question, or anything is going out of hand. So,
general question: should a brand announce to the consumer that, hey, you're talking to a bot?
It should.
Should not.
Because that's where the piece that I was talking about is the whole conversational user experience design lies, which means that you shouldn't launch a bot just to be perceived as a brand which is forwardly or technologically savvy brand,
right? Because it manages people's expectations because it's still developing. Like if you say, hey, this is a service and you're talking to a bot, then as a consumer, I'm gonna be like, okay, I know I'm talking about a bot. It's gonna run into the end of the FAQ and it's gonna be stupid.
Just to get the expectation.
I'm okay with that, yeah.
But right? I'll tell you why. Because most consumers, and this is a conversation we can have outside this room, if you ask him what's a bot, I'm sure 95% people in India would know what a bot is. And if you say I'm launching a bot, yes. But at the same time, if there is a conversational interface, whether it's voice or chat based, that starts to behave in a very rudimentary way, which at least my experience says most bots do, because they're launched in a very unprepared way. That's where the frustration at the consumer side lies, because at times bots you have so much of stuff today, names in social media of responses bots are given to people for questions that were.
And then there's a blend now too. You start the bot and they hand you over to the real person at a certain point.
Which is what a lot of
questions and they
that is what I said, which is an outcome of how you are able to train the bot.
Sorry, it says time's up. I do want to cover this. right? Privacy, we've alluded to it, right? GDPR and everything. So machine learning, you're getting all this data from people. And that's not necessarily have allowed you to do it. And you know, what's the whole, you know, ethics around, you know, privacy, machine learning, throwing this tons of computing power and trying to determine the person? Coach,
Yeah, sure.
I'll start
I'll take
with
this
you.
one. I
I'll
mean,
go to you next.
Yeah, I think that you know, having come from a company that doesn't necessarily worry about that just because we use only anonymized hash data, we're not allowed to take anything over the fence that has a first-party user ID associated with it, so no phone numbers, social security numbers, email addresses, or anything. Everything becomes a model of a model, and so that's where you know we're placing big bets. Is that predictive models that are, you know, based on more probabilistic models can be just as effective as deterministic models. But I'm going to throw one more wrench in there, is that that's what blockchain is supposed to solve for, right? So distributed applications.
Yeah, that's what blockchain in there.
I had to throw blockchain in, so we'll do it.
We're going to wrap up. Sundar, any thoughts on sort of privacy? Yeah, I mean, but if it gets smart enough, then it can actually find out who you are, right? Because of all this unstructured, whether the law allows it or not.
The person that's like you, it doesn't have to be that individual directly. Again, the more we can untie a user ID to the actual model data itself, you can still make experiences very relevant, very personalized.
Hello?
So, not going to be talking about privacy here because it's a very large topic and it's very regulated as far as banking is concerned. All I can say is it's a topic worth having another round of discussion because you can't have it summarized.
It's blinking. Vikram, any last thoughts?
I would just say with more power comes more responsibility.
That's a great way to end. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And let's have one thing come together for a group photograph as well.